Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Red Pill Diaries. And without further ado, my friend, my colleague, I gotta bring him on because you know how Carl is. Carl is going to go at it today. I gotta bring my guy in. Carl, how's it going today, my friend?
Hi, Rishi. How are you?
Man, I'm blessed, and I know there's a lot of news that we need to tackle today. But before we go into Russia, before we go into the Syrian conflict, before we go into North Africa, we've got to address the 800-pound gorilla in the room, the recent martial law in South Korea, and how it pertains to a collapsing empire. And for those of you who are looking and you see smoke coming across the screen, I actually have sage incense burning to clear the negative energy. So ignore that. Go ahead, Carl.
I mean, it's funny that the only time South Korea makes the news, the South Korean President Yoon, the first time was when he was singing American Pie in the White House to Biden. And next thing you know, he's doing an auto coup. And if it wasn't for this latest news, nobody in U.S. would have known Yoon is immensely unpopular in South Korea. We never knew about Biden's best friend. Because it's like like the famous saying, the history repeats itself. First as tragedy and second as farce. South Korea had many coups before, many coup and martial law, national emergency, but it was all under the military dictatorship. And this time, Yoon is supposedly, in a democracy, yet he's facing tremendous political pressure because he's unpopular. His wife, his wife is like unbroken scandal in South Korean media. So what does he do? He declare national emergency, declare martial law, because he declares the oppositional party in South Korea as North Korean agents, hostile state agents, and he uses opportunity to suspend the parliament, to declare emergency power, and send the South Korean military special forces to cordon off the South Korean parliament building so the representatives can't go in and declare the martial law unlawful. And so, so we all saw the footage, like it's the South Korean legislator, give them credit. They actually managed to climb over into the building and convene an emergency meeting and declare to nullify, to vote it unanimously for the martial law to be lifted. So now the South Korean president, you have to go back on his words, and mysteriously, in U.S. embassy in Korea, which hasn't said a peep about any of this, now they're coming out say, "Oh, we welcome the South Korean president's move to lift the martial law." When they're asked about it at State Department briefing, they claim, "Oh, we had no knowledge. We had no knowledge." Look, this is South Korea we're talking about. South Korea, the U.S. militarily occupied country, where U.S. maintained 28,000 military personnel inside the country and control over 79 military bases, where South Korea has no jurisdiction on what's going on inside those military bases. And during the time of war, according to bilateral treaty between U.S. and South Korea, during time of war, United States assumes the command of South Korean military. They will take over the whole country militarily. So you are telling me that you did not give Biden administration any heads up about what he's about to do, well, especially when he was going to deploy South Korean military to surround the parliament. I don't buy that. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't buy that at all. And again, we in the West, nothing was known about Yoon's unpopularity, his political trouble. Only thing we knew beforehand was he sing American Pie in the White House to Biden. By the way, that move was not very popular South Korea either, because they all saw that as what it is. Him kissing up to Biden. Nobody liked that, and so now we're in this situation where South Korea does this self coup, and all the journalists in Washington now they're trying to rush with explanation on what happened. I mean, what happened is this buffoon of a president. He's trying to save his own career by posting the inevitable. You know, his party is facing a major electoral defeat in the upcoming election, and here we are. I mean, props to the South Korean citizens and their legislators for standing up to this ridiculous self coup.
Well, Carl, you know, your take on it is I explained that exact scenario yesterday on the live. There is no way on earth that the United States occupying so many military facilities across South Korea and having control pretty much of their intelligence services and the entirety of the government and the military did not know. So what do you think when this guy says this about, oh, everybody was caught off guard? I'm going to play a little clip of a newscaster reporting on this situation. I'm not going to play the whole thing. I'm going to play the first minute or so, and I want you to hear what he has to say. Was he disingenuous or outright lying? Because he says, oh, the South Koreans were caught off guard. The U.S. Pentagon was caught off guard. No one really knew what was going on. I just want you to listen to this real quick.
We are following developing situation in South Korea. Their president has lifted martial law he imposed after the parliament defied him by voting to overturn it. It began when President Yoon Suk-yeol made an unannounced address to the nation declaring martial law while accusing his political opposition of sympathizing with North Korea. Following the order, the military announced political gatherings would be suspended. Despite that, enough members of parliament were able to meet and vote to block the martial law decree. Charlie D'Agata joins us now from the Pentagon. Charlie, thank you for making time for us. Can you walk us through how we got to this moment and what has happened since the martial law was ordered?
Weijia, nice to see you again. It has been a tumultuous day. You know, the night ended in South Korea with the South Korean president declaring martial law. It took everybody by surprise. It took South Korea by surprise. Obviously, North Korea took the Pentagon, State Department, White House. Nobody was expecting this. And it was real. That martial law went into effect immediately. And as you said, banning protest.
So he could not possibly think that the U.S. and the Pentagon and the intelligence services of the United States were caught off guard when real power rests with the authorities of the United States and how they formulate policy for South Korea. I mean, this was a disingenuous statement at the least, but it was an outright lie and deceptive at the most. What do you have to say about so-called media organizations reporting in this manner on something so big, because it has a lot to do with China and what's going on in the region?
Well, I mean, isn't it funny that the reporter asked him a straightforward question, you know, what's happening in South Korea? The first thing he does was went into denial mode. We didn't know anything about it. We got caught off by surprise. You know, it's like what they say, there's no confirmation until the official denial. So there you have it, the official denial. And we also heard it from the spokesperson of the White House as well. So why is South Korea right now is on the front line of a new Cold War imposed by United States against China, against Russia. One of the his self-taught achievement was to put South Korea and Japan together in a trilateral military alliance with the United States to contain China, which, by the way, is a deeply unpopular move in South Korea. Nobody wanted to be in a military alliance together with Japan, you know, their former colonizer. But this is what United States pushed for. And the funny thing is, right as the coup coup was unfolding after Yoon had declared national emergency and martial law. In Taiwan, the governing party of Taiwan, DPP, they put out a tweet, which now they have just deleted. They put out a tweet that said, "We're fully support of President Yoon's decision to stamp out those hostile anti-state forces. And we in Taiwan should emulate what South Korean president is doing." Because in Taiwan, the DPP governing party is facing this very similar situation with Yoon, because they have been closely towing the Washington line by stirring trouble with mainland China, and they barely got elected by winning 40% of the electoral votes, which means 60% of the voters voted against them. But the only reason they won is because the opposition was divided. So that 60% of the vote was divided into 30% for one candidate and 30% for another candidate. And so now they're saying, "Oh, all you oppositions, you're all anti-state forces. Look what South Korea did. We can also declare martial law here and round you up and shut you down." And but now, of course, they quietly removed that tweet after the South Korean self-coup has been turned out to be a big farce. But this is what's going on in Washington. That's what Washington has always done: supporting unpopular governments. As long as they're our bastards, as long as they toe Washington's line, as long as they accomplish what U.S. imperial objectives in East Asia, anywhere in the world, they're okay. They're okay by our books. They get away to do all kind of things. And U.S. at best turns a blind eye. At worst, U.S. actively support them. This is what happened in the previous South Korean coup. During the time of dictatorship, U.S. actually helped South Korean government to put down popular protests with a lot of bloodshed, and then provide political covering for them. The only reason that South Korea managed to transition to a democracy, this was because as the Cold War 1.0 was unfolding, United States realized, okay, we can't justify on anti-communism to support this military dictatorship anymore. We need a better reason to justify this. So this is why they then acquiesced to the democratic transition in places like South Korea, like Taiwan, and then now U.S. can say, "Oh, we are for democracy and freedom. We're defending this place because of democracy," and so we don't have to then backward doing mental gymnastics about how we're defending freedom when all these guys are military dictatorship. But the nature of South Korea's relationship with Washington remain unchanged. It's a militarily occupied country. South Korea can't say no to the United States. When the previous South Korean presidents had tried to have better ties with North Korea, that was officially frowned upon by United States. U.S. officially poo-pooed all the sunshine policy, whatever policy that South Korean government tried to have reconciliation with the North, because the tension in the Korean Peninsula is very useful to the United States. That justifies the U.S. troops on the ground. That justifies the 79 military bases in South Korea. It justified for U.S. to put the THAAD system in South Korea, which they claim is against North Korea, but everyone knows it was used to against China. And this in a time when U.S. is trying to militarize the whole periphery of China in order to contain it. What happened in South Korea is it's an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment to the White House. It's embarrassment to the U.S. Policy in the region. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't. I mean, like right now, Biden administration, their goal seems to be just light up fire before they get out of the office. This is why they escalate in Ukraine. This is why they are escalating in the Middle East. Not only full-throated support of Israel, but they're also reactivating the frozen conflict that was Syria. And now you have this fiasco in South Korea. U.S. goal is never about promoting stability. U.S. goal has always been lighting fire all around the globe. So United States itself seems this oasis of calm. That's where they want you to put your hard-earned currency in to buy U.S. Treasury bill, to buy U.S. debt, continue to finance the U.S. empire and military adventures. That's why Donald Trump put out that tweet that he's threatening all the BRICS countries, like, we're gonna up the tariff up to the wazoo if you dare to have an alternative currency to the U.S. dollar. We're gonna demand everyone to use U.S. dollars, because right now they're really worried. They're really worried that the de-dollarization trend is gonna upset the whole scheme. Back in 1968, that's when Henry Kissinger noticed United States is shifting from a trade surplus country into a trade deficit country. And this is when the Washington elite got really worried, because they know how this plays out in history. They have learned their history. They know once the nation goes into deficit and continuously, this is the start of the decline. So they tried to find a solution. And their solution was, we're going to triple our deficit. Because when an ordinary person owe the bank, like $100, couple thousand, tens of $1,000s, then you're in trouble. You're liable to pay back your debt. But if somebody like Donald Trump that owes the banks like millions, hundreds of tens of millions, $100 million of dollars, and suddenly it's the bank that don't want him to fail because he still owns the money. This is how U.S. operate. U.S. is ratcheting up the deficit. It's fueling its trade surplus by continually issuing printing money, printing dollars, and have other foreign government and foreign wealthy individual to continue to finance this U.S. debt by buying into the U.S. treasuries. And then U.S. suddenly became this indispensable nation. Everybody, the people don't want U.S. dollar system to collapse because that's going to cause the financial collapse of the entire world. And then U.S. is just very comfortably printing money and then just getting all the fruit of labor from Asia, from Germany, from all across the world. They are able to buy all these imported goods with their paper IOUs. It's a sweet gig, but at the moment that gig gets threatened, this is where Donald Trump comes in and threatening everybody. Don't you dare thinking about it. This is why I love Donald Trump, because he posts the facade. He posts the facade of the U.S. empire off and revealing the emperor has no clothes. And this is why U.S. establishment hate him, because he calls it as it is. When he goes on national television and says, "Well, I did a great job in Syria. We pulled the soldier back, but I believe just enough for the oil because I love the oil. We gotta have the oil." Everybody knows that's true, and they can't. Before Trump, we have Obama. He present a very urbane, sophisticated facade. He always provide plausible deniability about what the U.S. empire is actually doing. But Trump just comes and rip the whole cloth off, and they're like, "Hey, we are the U.S. empire. We're the biggest, baddest bullies. We're gonna take the oil. We're gonna take everything, and you all have to pay for it." And this is, And so we're now at that stage. We're at the late stage of imperial decline,
Yeah.
where everybody now kind of know what the game is, and the emperor has no clothes. But this is, but U.S. will keep on trucking on what they always do, which is continue to destabilize the world and hoping that the money will continue to come to the United States.
Mm-hmm. Now I want to go back. Oh, I have the clip on Trump threatening BRICS, and we'll play that shortly. But I want to go back to this South Korean thing because I don't think people know how strategic and how serious this martial law is. Let us not forget about Jeju Island, how the United States wants to set up naval facilities 5 miles off the coast of mainland China. Let's not forget about something that took place that has everything to do with the imposition of martial law. Um, you remember they did a study in North Korea, and they found out that North Korea has a lot of rare earth minerals that are not mined. They have a lot of untapped gold and oil and all of this stuff. And the United, from my perspective, after China did what it did, as a matter of fact, I think I have it up on one of the screens. This is an article on RT, and it goes hand in hand with the coup. The coup took place, and I think yesterday, wasn't it? And the article comes out yesterday on RT, and it says China strikes back at U.S. weaponization of trade. And this is what it says. Beijing has responded to Washington imposed curbs by restricting key exports of key rare metals and some dual-use items. Now, this comes at a time when the United States was trying to collapse the government of North Korea with war games, with economic pressure, but so that they can then send South Korea up to the border with China, and they can extract these rare earth metals and minerals for pennies on the dollar. And then this would allow the U.S. to have military bases right there on China and Russia's periphery, right on the border with them. And with the imposition of martial law, at the same time that China announced that they were sanctioning the United States and holding back rare earth material now, I think that all of that plays a part in what the United States is trying to do, put pressure on like weaker allies of China and Russia in Syria and Armenia, Georgia, and they're trying to break them so that they can push further up on China and Russia to, first of all, to prevent Russia from reemerging as a global power, but more importantly, to stop China's rise, because China will be the preeminent military, political, and economic power. What do you say on that matter?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, U.S. never gave up its goal of regime change in North Korea. That's just why they have maintained sanction after all these years. People don't, people they when in people in the West have been so brainwashed whenever you bring North Korea, they're like, oh, Rocket Man, right? What they don't realize is back in the Clinton era, they tried to convince North Korea to denuclearize, right? So Clinton offered a carrot that they say, okay, U.S. will provide North Korea with technology for building nuclear reactors, and in return, North Korea will give up their nuclear program. So at that time, North Korea did put a freeze on their nuclear program in exchange for this a lifting of sanctions and the U.S. help with building nuclear reactors to provide energy for the country. And what happened? John Bolton under George W. Bush scattered the deal, just like how Trump would later scatter the Iran deal signed by Obama. So North Korea said, okay, no problem. You tore up the agreement. We're going to go nuclear. And see how trajectory of the different countries that gave up their nuclear program after U.S. pressure went. I say North Korea made the right call because Gaddafi had a nuclear program. Saddam was pursuing a nuclear program. Both countries gave up their nuclear program under U.S. pressure, and then what happened? And I mean, Gaddafi was was raped to death with a bayonet, and U.S. invaded Iraq. North Korea is standing pretty right now because he has nukes and he has ICBM that's capable of delivering those nukes to the United States. So U.S. is willing to mess with Libya, mess with Iraq, but they know better than to mess with North Korea directly because they know it will lead to grave consequences for U.S. itself. So what does U.S. do instead? They try to instead of direct military threat or military confrontation, it tries a hybrid warfare against North Korea. So this combination of economic sanctions, propaganda war, and then you try to create the tension via the U.S. military alliance with South Korea. I mean, recently, U.S. was holding large-scale military exercises with South Korea near the border with North Korea. And when North Korea responded by launching a missile test, and U.S. media, see, Kim is so aggressive. The Rocket Man, he's doing it again. But what they don't tell you is what U.S. has been doing in the region, which is continually militarizing, raising tensions, so U.S. can put more military hardware in South Korea. This is how they got the THAAD system in South Korea in the first place a few years back. They raised the military tension with North Korea, and they say, okay, now we need anti-missile defense against North Korea, which is ridiculous because North Korean missiles are not designed for South Korea. North Korea can hit Seoul with artillery. That's how close Seoul is to the border. They don't need an ICBM or intermediate range ballistic missile to hit South Korea. Those missiles are for Japan and United States. Let's be clear. So they put those that system out in South Korea. Their stated goal is to against North Korean missile, but really it's against China. That's what United States is really worried about. And that, by the way, when before 2017, before the time when United States 2017, 2016, when U.S. had made the decision to put that system on in South Korea, at that time, South Korean car makers and U.S. car makers were making money head and over heels in China because China is the world's largest car market. But after the THAAD system, if you look at the car sales of South Korean cars and GM and Ford cars in China, it just nosedived because the Chinese consumer just decided, you know what? We don't need this. We don't need to finance your economy so you can put more missiles around our borders. And China used to be one of the most profitable market for GM. Even when GM was declaring bankruptcy after the great financial crisis of 2008, I went to China around 2010, and one of my dad's classmates' daughters, she works at GM China. She was asking me, "What is GM doing in America? We are making money. We're profitable here in China. Why are they losing money in Detroit? We're making all the money for them right now." But that has all changed. Now American car makers, GM, Ford, they're all fighting for their life in China because they're getting their lunch taken away by the Chinese car makers now. So this is another reason why U.S. is trying to tighten sanctions against China, because they saw China now just it's no longer a place where U.S. multinational is just going there to exploit the labor and the market and making money. Now they see the Chinese have their own national brand companies who are serious competitors. So now they're trying to shut down China. And this is why they're trying to create tensions. This is in the Cold War they have this. It's literally called the strategy of tension. They create tensions all around not in the stated enemy like Soviet Union or China. They create tension in their allied countries, right? So to shut down dissent, to primarily to shut down any opposition, and concentrate on power into the allies of the USA and CIA. This is what Yoon was doing, by the way. He claimed the opposition are North Korean state agents. He's claimed the South Korean opposition party are North Korean state agents. That's his excuse for imposing the martial law. But this is the same playbook that they used during the Cold War. But of course, it doesn't play as well in 2024 in days of internet and alternative media. People saw through it as what it is, and this is why I think we're gonna in the next few days we're gonna see the fallout of South Korean self-coup. I mean, I give props to you. I mean, he has balls to do that with his approval rating basically in the dumpsters, and he thinks somehow he has a legitimacy or the charisma to pull it off. I mean, it's comedy for the rest of us, but right now I'm sure the U.S. Embassy in South Korea is working overtime to trying to repair the damage at the moment.
Shelley, I believe North Korea, the estimated, I was looking at some, I don't know how true this is, but I was looking at some estimates say their nuclear weapons is between 30 and 100 nuclear bombs. I'm not sure. Is it on the lower end or the higher end? I don't have any inkling of that, but some estimates are saying between 30 and 100 nuclear bombs. But I also saw some that said it was only 12, but they lie. The West lies so much you cannot put any trust in anything they do. But I want to go back to something that Carl was talking about the BRICS, and I also want to go back about this so-called democracy in South Korea, because this is very important. Now, the Western world who advocates the spread of democracy and that these governments, to be legitimate, they must be democracies or whatever. Not one nation in NATO condemned the coup or the martial law imposition in South Korea. The United States did not condemn the martial law imposition of South Korea because that's their man, and they understood that the parliament was trying to dial down tensions with North Korea, and they were actually talking about, hey, let's restart the reunification council, and that is a no-no because it does not benefit the United States. But as we talk about this, I want to play a clip for you, because the West is outraged that Georgia would exercise its democratic rights, but it's not outraged that their puppet in South Korea imposed martial law. And what I'm trying to show you is that the West, they're hypocrites. From the United States to London to Paris to Berlin, they are all hypocrites. So listen to this, Carl, and after this we'll address what's really going on.
The coverage of the protests here in Georgia seems to be focusing on one thing, that it's the current government in Tbilisi that's walking away from the EU. But in reality, is that the case? Yes, in the last few days, the ruling party has said that it is halting talks for accession with the EU until at least 2028. But in reality, it was the EU that walked away from those talks many months ago.
Regrettably, Georgia's EU accession process is stopped for now. This has been decided by EU leaders during the last European Council.
Since the parliamentary elections in October, the accusations coming in from the West are clear. Georgia Dream, it says, did not legitimately win the election, and they're demanding that the Georgian Prime Minister stand down.
The European Parliament considers that with the legitimacy of the vote severely undermined by the magnitude of the violations, the international community should not recognize the election results. Rejects, therefore, any recognition of the parliamentary elections and calls for them to be rerun within a year.
Yet despite the Electoral Commission confirming those results, the West is flatly refusing to accept them. Why? Well, perhaps it's difficult for them to understand that not everybody wants to be in their gang. And how are they responding? Well, they're calling for more protests. And the pro-European president of Georgia says she is not going to stand down when her term ends in the next few weeks. She's calling on the EU to support her.
We want our European destiny returned to us. This is the revolt of an entire country.
And while Brussels is considering sanctions against some members of the Georgia Dream Party, other European countries are already taking matters into their own hands.
The three Baltic states jointly agreed to impose national sanctions against those who suppressed legitimate protests in Georgia. Opponents of democracy and violators of human rights are not welcome in our countries.
The EU has also suggested it may punish all Georgians by removing the visa-free visiting rights they currently hold. Meanwhile, its top diplomat has added her voice to the criticism of what she describes as heavy-handed tactics by the forces of order.
It is clear that using violence against peaceful protesters is not acceptable, and the Georgian government should respect the will of the Georgian people. When it comes to the European Union, then this clearly has consequences on our relationship with Georgia.
The idea that it's the police perpetrating violence against the protesters is also another narrative that's being spun by the Western media.
Demonstrators responded to police water cannons and tear gas by aiming fireworks at the police lines. Protesters stormed the headquarters of the ruling Georgian Dream Party.
Police used water cannon and tear gas. In response, protesters hurled stones and used fireworks as improvised weapons. Fireworks have become a symbol of the protests. The demonstrators also built barricades and lit bonfires.
This is disinformation at its best. We have witnessed the protests firsthand. It is the protesters who start the violence. We have seen the police stand for hours while fireworks are directed at them, glass bottles are thrown at them, stones are lobbied in their direction. Callas also talked about Georgia Dream, the ruling party, respecting the will of the people. But the will of who? Some perhaps 100,000 protesters in a country of up to almost 4 million people? If such logic is to be applied, then President Macron of France should have stepped down during the Yellow Vest protests. The EU Parliament should have dissolved following mass rallies over COVID restrictions. And all of this comes as the West has admitted the real reason it wants the Georgian government to fold. It's uneasy that relations with Moscow have improved.
The United States, along with our colleagues in Europe, have long, strong, and steadfast friends to the people of Georgia. Unfortunately, this powerful bond has recently come under the withering attack by the ruling Georgian Dream Party. The Georgian Dream government has openly renounced the long-standing democratic and Euro-Atlantic choice of the Georgian people, ramming a Putin-esque-style foreign agent law through Parliament. The United States must not allow this attack on Georgian democracy and its Euro-Atlantic future to go unanswered.
The EU says Georgia's path towards it can be cleared, but only if it does as it's told, that the government resigns, that laws enacted to uphold traditional values are dismantled. The Georgian PM has described this as blackmail and is refusing to back down.
We will continue to move towards the European Union, but we will not allow anyone to constantly keep us under a mode of blackmail and manipulation, which is completely offensive to our country and society.
As the West pushes for its way or the highway, as it continues to demand more protests in Georgia, is it not the West, and therefore the EU by default, that is causing the huge chasm here, and not the other way around? Charlotte Dubinsky reporting for RT from Tbilisi.
Oh, they said that the protesters, as they storm Parliament, have the right to protest. Why didn't they think of that on January 6th when the protests stormed the Washington Capitol? Why were they so outraged and saying that this was an affront to democracy and to the nation and to national security. But as the U.S. Pumped in this money and trained and organized these people and gave them the go ahead, as they met with a strong rebuff from the legitimate authorities of Georgia, they do what the United States refused to do and allow those protesters to storm the Capitol buildings and take them.
Well, Rashid, this is a rule-based international order, which means one set of rule for you and one set of rule for us. This is how they. This is the same playbook that they played out in Taiwan with the Sunflower Movement, and the same playbook they played out in Hong Kong in 2019 protests. You know, all these movement involved storming of the parliament, of the legislature, and this the same playbook they played in Euromaidan in Ukraine, and of course, just like ICC, you know, what they say about ICC is for those people in the jungle. ICC is for the jungle. It's never supposed to apply to the civilized garden in the West. You know, never going to apply to Netanyahu, never going to apply to war criminals in Washington, because ICC is for those people in the global South. And same when they talk about rule-based international order, is we get to screw with your political system. You can't do that back to us. And this is why they have freak out about so-called Chinese and Russian interference in U.S. election, which is completely bogus. U.S. do this to other people, and what they're doing in Georgia right now, this is the same playbook as they do in Euromaidan. You know, it's staged by all these so-called NGOs. What's NGO? Non-governmental organization. But if you really dig deep into it, all these non-governmental organizations are funded by governments, by foreign governments, you know, by NED, the National Endowment for Democracy, and wait, Victoria Nuland, she heads an NED right now. I mean, like they're not even trying to hide it. And Georgia is one of the frontier state that the West NATO uses against Russia. You know, back even before 2008, people now may not remember, but back then they pushed Georgia into a confrontation with Russia by having Georgian military to go inside starting a war against the southern Ossetia, a breakaway republic inside Georgia, and that invited Russia to come in because Russia has agreement with the government of southern Ossetia. So this is what was built by the West as the Russian invasion of Georgia, when it was Georgian government that started the war. Similarly, like how it played out in Ukraine, there was Ukrainian government that started war against its own citizens in East Ukraine. That's what brought Russia in eventually. But this is how the proxy war is being played. Georgia, people in Georgia has now they have realized after almost a decade they're not getting anything from being the pawn, from being the proxy, the pawns in the Western game, gray game against Russia. You know, their economy is, you know, their hope before was being integrated into EU, so they can all travel to Europe and get jobs, and there will be a lot of investment coming to Georgia. But the result is they're being turned into a battleground state against Russia. Now you have Georgian terrorists popping up in Syria, you know, to wage jihad against Bashar al-Assad. You know, this is why the Georgian people have finally waken up and they decide they don't want this anymore. And this is when the U.S. and his NATO ally put their foot down. So like, oh, I'm sorry, we're just joking about all this the democracy promotion. Well, like we only want our side to be heard. So if you dare to voice against us, then we cannot no longer certify as your democracy. We have to put you down. This is what happened. This is exactly same playbooks they're playing in Euromaidan. They're gonna get some protesters, gonna get some saboteur to stir up the violence, and then they're gonna blame the state forces in Georgia for cracking down, quote unquote, a peaceful protest, and then it's the same regime change playbook. This is the whole reason Georgia is passing the law against those NGOs and stirring the trouble. But we're gonna have to see. We're gonna have to see how this play out. You have a president that's refusing to certify the election that has been certified by the outside observers. Refusing. I mean, look at what happened in Georgia. It's almost very similar to what happened in South Korea. And take that further, it's actually very similar to what happened in France. Macron, his party lost the election, and yet this guy pretend like nothing happened. But he pretend like, okay, I'm still the president. I'm just not going to recognize the election results. And yet these are the same people who are going around the world lecturing people on democracy. Are you kidding me? I mean, who's the United States to lecture anybody on democracy? We don't have a democracy. United States is an oligarchy that have elections. It's an oligarchic uniparty that hold elections every 4 years to bestow upon itself legitimacy. And then really there's really such minor difference between the uniparty factions. The only difference is one side want to wind down the Ukraine war so they can concentrate on confronting China, and the other side says, no, we can do both. We can still do Ukraine, we can still do Taiwan and Middle East. We can do it all because we are number one. I mean, this is the only difference among the uniparty war party in Washington. But we know this. I mean, our audience knows this, but here we are.
And what was so arrogant, and I think the arrogance is so ingrained in these power brokers in the West that they don't even understand that they are letting their arrogance show. Like when the congressman was talking, our long-held friendship with Georgia. How is your friendship longer than Russia's friendship with Georgia when Georgia was a part of the Soviet Union and one of the most famous Soviet leaders was a Georgian? So how in the world can your quote unquote friendship supersede decades upon decades of Russian and Georgian friendship, cultural friendship, ethnic friendship, even the languages and stuff? How, when they say these things, they don't sit back and think about how other people will look at these statements that they're saying. To me, it is the height of hubris and imperial arrogance when they state these things. But I want to go to something else that you were talking about, the BRICS, and you were talking about Donald Trump. And so I'm going to play a clip about Trump and what he has to say about the BRICS, and we'll come back right after that and we'll address that call. So pay close attention to this.
He might be the master of the deal, but anyone knows that the first rule in business, never show your hand. And yet here Trump is, revealing what most of us already knew. The dollar is feeling the heat. Well, maybe Trump missed the memo. That was a joke mock-up. There is no single BRICS currency, not in the here and now and not in the pipeline either. But an empire in decline can be blind to reality. It can be dangerous too, especially if it's one that's got a track record of sowing death and destruction at exactly the same time, maybe coincidentally, that the precious greenback was at risk. You might remember two men, Muammar Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein. You know what they had in common? They really weren't fans of the dollar.
Africa has come of age. Therefore, all the processes towards establishing a uniform currency should be revisited with a view to hasten the process. Africa should surpass Europe in the establishment of strong unity and the integration of the African economies, which will translate into the creation of a single market, single central bank, and uniform currency for the continent.
That report was issued by the African Union under Gaddafi's chairmanship. Imagine the most resource-rich continent on Earth, brimming with minerals and oil and diamonds. And its nations would use a gold-backed Pan-African currency. All those treasures outside of the dollar's ecosystem. And that was something that kept Washington up at night. Brought to you straight from then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's hacked inbox.
Gaddafi's government holds 143 tons of gold and a similar amount in silver. During late March 2011, these stocks were moved to Sabha, southwest in the direction of the Libyan border with Niger and Chad, taken from the vaults of the Libyan Central Bank in Tripoli. This gold was accumulated prior to the current rebellion and was intended to be used to establish a pan-African currency based on the Libyan golden dinar.
Well, you know the rest of the story. American Tomahawk cruise missiles rained down on Gaddafi's forces, and by the end of the year, the Libyan leader was no more.
We came, we saw, he died. Did it have anything to do with your visit? No, I'm sure it did.
And the Pan-African currency dream died, never to be resurrected. Gaddafi's fate wasn't too different from Saddam Hussein's, who announced in 2000 that Iraq would be ditching the dollar in some of its oil exports. Venezuela then followed suit, then Iran. Imagine, three of the world's biggest oil producers outside of the dollar's ecosystem. Well, Washington couldn't risk any more dominoes falling.
If most other organization of petroleum exporting countries, OPEC, followed the Iraqi and Iranian example, the stability of the US dollar would be at stake.
Well, you know the rest of the story. Saddam is no more. And trade in dollars was restored. You see, dollars circulating keep the American economy afloat. Countries around the world have to hold a stash to trade. And any surplus they have, well, it's often reinvested into things like Treasury securities, which help finance the government budget and run trade deficits and build up foreign debt. But the world of Saddam in 2003 or Gaddafi in 2011, that's not the world of 2024. And BRICS is a group representing 45% of the global population, 35% of its GDP, 44% of its crude oil. And together they've decided that dealing in national currencies, well, that's not a bad idea. Trump's words won't push them off course, but they do betray another obvious fact. The dollar isn't a currency, it's a weapon.
Just today, Brazil, in our hemisphere, largest country in the Western Hemisphere south of us, cut a trade deal with China. They're going to, from now on, do trade in their own currencies, get right around the dollar. They're creating a secondary economy in the world, totally independent of the United States. We won't have to talk about sanctions in 5 years because there'll be so many countries transacting in currencies other than the dollar that we won't have the ability to sanction them.
Rubio is Trump's pick for Secretary of State, by the way, so I think you get the picture. There might be a new boss in the Oval Office, but it turns out he's the same as the old one. Because old habits, well, old habits die hard.
So all of this foolishness about spreading democracy is really about maintaining dollar hegemony. And that is one of the main reasons why the U.S., the Pentagon, the State Department labeled China as the most pressing threat to the U.S.-led rules-based order. And one would have to ask, well, if Russia has more nuclear weapons than everybody on the planet, how could China be the most pressing threat? And there you have it. It's because China's economic clout, growing economic power, along with this growing military power and political clout, puts the U.S. dollar in jeopardy, which means that the United States will no longer have a free hand at sanctioning nations, destabilizing nations, exporting inflation to nations, and they don't want an even or equal playing field because they have seen in spurts that whenever the playing field has become even, they get outplayed. And I want you to respond on that, but I want to say this before you do, Carl. That is the one of the reasons why I believe Elon Musk was brought into the Trump administration also, because we see that Elon Musk, so-called the richest man in the world, so-called, and his Tesla is the envy of the Western world. But when you compare it to China's new EVs and China's rising competitors against it, shows that the Western companies are lacking, and this could be a threat to America's leadership in the EV department and America's technological advantage. What do you say about that, Carl?
Well, first of all, Elon's Tesla, more than 50% of the Tesla are produced in Shanghai. They're made in China, and it has a majority of Chinese suppliers, which means Tesla actually depends on Chinese batteries. That's Tesla do not own their own battery technology. They use the Chinese batteries. So in a way, I mean, China let Tesla come in because they let Tesla own the factory 100%, unlike in the past where China require foreign car maker to enter into joint ventures. Because at this point, China feels like, you know what, competition is good. We're not scared of Americans coming here to open up their factories, but you do need to make sure you use a certain percentage of local suppliers. This actually helped to create a whole ecosystem of Chinese EV suppliers that were able to supply the Chinese EV revolution. And Tesla knows, and Elon knows this. That's why Elon says, if we don't have tariffs, the Chinese are going to kill us. The Chinese are going to kill the Detroit Big Three, and this is why it gives a lot of anxiety to people in Washington. They're not used to the world where they're no longer number one. They're no longer dominating in every aspect of technological, military, economic sphere. And China being a as you say, a non-Western, non-white nation, that's even more anathema to like their whole world view, how the world should function, because the hubris come from kind of the Western domination of the globe for the past few hundred years. And now as Joseph Borrell, the famous gardener, has said, the Western dominance is coming to an end. Jungle has overgrown. It's gonna take over the garden. So this is what the real fear of China came about among the Western elite, because they can't imagine a world where it's no longer unipolar, U.S. dominated in every sphere of life. But I say get used to it, because I mean, Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, these guys they're reacting. They're literally reactionaries, because China is now pioneering a new path, and U.S. is fighting a losing battle to keep its top dog status. I very much looking forward, by the way, to the next 4 years partnering of Little Marco and Trump, because it's going to provide so many comedy hours for the rest. But this is they are so worried about dollar losing its power, its hegemony, because they know that's what's sustaining U.S. right now. That's what's sustaining the U.S. empire. It's one of the last leg last pillar. I say there's 3 pillars of the U.S. empire: military, technology, and financial. But financial, the U.S. dollar hegemony is really the one leg that supports the other 2 legs. And once that goes, everything goes. And Trump, that's why he's threatening a sanction against against the world's largest economic bloc, which completely doesn't make sense. What U.S. will end up doing if he carries out his threats, which there's a fair amount of doubt on that too. Because Trump say a lot of things, but if he does carry out, it would just means the U.S. will wall itself off from the rest of the world. You will be just U.S. and U.S. satellite states in Europe and a bunch of them in East Asia. That's it. That's the so-called international community will now be fully insulated from the rest of the world, and while the rest of the world move forward. You can't have Chinese EVs in United States, despite they're packed with values for they're packed with value for the provide the real bang for your buck. But we can't have them because they rather for you to buy the $80,000 trucks from GM or Ford. They can't have Americans buy $10,000 cars. That's because everybody will buy them. Everybody will buy them, and that's why they can't have it. So we're going to have a increasingly technologically and economically cut off U.S. if they pursue that kind of policy. I don't know how sustainable that's going to be, because nowadays everything is made in China. People in United States, especially among the elite, they don't really value labor. They don't really value manufacturing. This is why they think, we have the money. If the China don't make them, we'll just make them elsewhere. But that's not how it works. Just like Apple found out when they tried to ship the production line out of China to India for iPhone 15, and now they're back to China for iPhone 16. Manufacturing is actually hard work. China created a whole ecosystem, but because the U.S. have created this whole mentality of worshiping the Wall Street, they think everything else is just everything else is exchangeable. We can exchange, we can swap out labor, we can swap out one for other to just pop a factory, no problem. But this is not how the world works. Manufacturing requires infrastructure, it requires knowledge, it requires educated labor force, and those things that United States no longer have after 4 decades of deindustrializing as a policy, pushed by the Wall Street. Now, even if they say they want to reindustrialize United States, but 1, you don't have the infrastructure. 2, you don't have the educated labor anymore, and on top of that, you are pushing those away, like with their persecution of Chinese researchers and Chinese scientists. Many of them are now returning back to mainland China. So we don't have educated workforce. We don't have the knowledge, the know-how of manufacturing anymore after being hollowing out the industry for 40 years. That's like 2 generations of people who were not trained to do manufacturing. And you can't just snap your fingers and I'll just pay more money and it's gonna give me a factory. No, that's not gonna how it works. You need workers, you need infrastructure. U.S. is having rail derailment a couple times a year. U.S. infrastructure is crumbling. Nobody is investing in them. It's gonna require a whole a national effort to reindustrialize America, but the U.S. government is not structured for that kind of thing. Chinese government can mobilize its population to transform it within a span of 40 years, left to 800 million people out of poverty. But U.S. government is not designed for that kind of thing. U.S. government is designed to extract rent from the rest of the Americans, to extract it up to the top 1%. That's what it's designed for. It's not designed for building infrastructure. It's not designed for building, upgrading your public schools. It's not designed for the kind of industrial policy that China was very successfully implementing in their country, because they have a high functioning government. But US also have a high functioning government, just for a different purpose. It's for wealth extraction from the masses and from the rest of the world. So yeah.
And Carl, don't forget this. Don't forget also, with all of that, you also have to be willing to fight corruption. And that's something that we have constantly seen the Chinese government. They don't care if you're poor or you have $1 billion. If you violate the laws, they will put you behind bars. In the United States, the way the government is set up, they have lobbyists. That is bribing the politicians to implement policies that are beneficial to the rich and that are detrimental to the poor. So you have to have that in play too, to bring back a proper balance between the laborer and those who control the labor. They don't have that here, and they refuse to get that back here in America.
I think people are finally start wising up to that, because every time China lock up a banker or corrupt politicians, Wall Street Journal, they will come out and say, "Oh, this is a problem. This is a problem with China." Even this defense minister who had very close tie with Xi Jinping, he's still getting purged for corruption. And people in the comments like, "I wish we had that in the United States." I mean, like, why? This actually shows even the people who have close personal ties with Xi Jinping, they get removed for corruption. They get locked up for corruption. In the United States, you get a slap on the back and you get appointed in the Trump cabinet. Like that. That's how it works. and like this Wall Street Journal is trying to tell us what China is doing is some kind of problem. No, there's no problem with locking up bankers. We wish that could be done in the United States. And the problem with the United States is those bankers get promotion and they go on to rule the country. And so yeah, the recent take an example of the recent Chinese sanction on the counter sanction on U.S. because Biden administration in its outgoing days decided to slap another round of chip sanction on China, because their thinking is, if our previous sanction didn't work, that means we must apply more sanctions. And so China said, "Oh, you know what? Okay, what's your justification for the chip sanction?" U.S. says, "Oh, they're dual-use item. They could use by China to use those chips to power their AI to develop their nuclear weapons." China says, "Okay, well, yeah, you're right. We should look into dual-use items. All these rare earth minerals, gallium, germanium, antimony." They're dual-use metals. They're literally called death metals because they're used in a lot of the production of the military parts. We are going to ban export to United States for those dual-use items, and we're going to prevent third-party re-exports. We're going to monitor the sales, so we make sure there's not going to be a third party who imports them from China and re-export to United States for profit. Now, this is where a lot of Americans are still in denial and high on copium on this. Oh, it's like no problem. U.S. we just open a new factory. We just started developing our own processing power. Oh, first of all, even if that were true, it takes years for a new mine and new processing plant to come online. Second of all, gallium is not just something you pull out of the earth. Gallium is a byproduct aluminum production, because usually processing gallium by itself is not economically feasible. So it's a byproduct of aluminum production. But aluminum production requires tons of electricity. And if you look at the U.S. power grid, if you look at the U.S. power generation for the last 20 years, it's flat. It's literally a flat line. Whereas the Chinese power production generation is going up. And this is why China could afford the EV transition, because they actually have the electricity to power it. Whereas U.S., you don't have the extra electricity generation to either power a EV transition, nor do you have enough electricity to power additional aluminum plant that would have give you gallium. So this is because Americans are so far removed from the manufacturing process. Right. They really have this kind of condescending attitude toward labor and toward manufacturing. They think, oh, it's easy. We'll just hire some immigrants. We'll pop up a plant. We print more money. We pop up a plant. We hire some immigrant to do all the dirty works for us. That's not how it works. It requires infrastructure. It requires trained workforce. U.S. don't have that. And they even have so much trouble trying to onshore semiconductor manufacturing in the United States when they force TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor, to open the plant in Arizona. And there's running into so many issues. The TSMC founder, Morris Chan, said, we just can't find the qualified engineers in the United States. And now TSMC is getting sued in Arizona for preferring to hire Taiwanese engineers because they're on the ground. They're being sued for being racist because they prefer to hire Taiwanese engineers rather than Americans. And this is a state of this is a result of U.S. government providing a lot of subsidies to its chip industry to provide a lot of tax incentives for the TSMC to come over to open up the plant. Yet, it's still nowhere near production. And the problem is the U.S. elite don't realize this is a serious problem. They still think everything can be solved by just printing more money, and that couldn't be further from the truth, because U.S. has more fundamental problems in the way its government is structured, the way its society is structured. It's not geared toward manufacturing. It's not geared toward providing decent life for the average Americans. Everything is geared toward trickling the wealth up to the top, and that's the real problem. But no one knows to say it. You cannot say that in mainstream media that this is a problem that U.S. need to solve. And so instead, you just get the politicians blaming China, scapegoating. Okay, it's all China's problem that all your jobs are gone. It's China's problem that there's inflation, and then we're gonna make it worse by slapping tariff on China, 60%, which the U.S. importers will have to pay. China is not paying for those tariffs, by the way. It's Americans who are paying for those tariffs. So so here we are. I'm ranting, but this is every time I talk about U.S. policies, how stupid they are. I get too excited. Sorry.
Well, I want to play a clip, and this is about how the United States is ruining itself by sanctioning 2/3 of the population of the planet Earth. And I want to play this clip and come back with a little article, and then you and I guess we can bring it to a close, and then we'll do part 2 of this. So I just want you to listen to this call.
The countries of the collective West have launched a real sanctions war against half, if not the majority, of the population of our planet, using this illegitimate, from the point of view of international law, instrument to achieve their economic and foreign policy goals. They cause enormous suffering to the populations of countries that are defenseless against the baton of sanctions.
In some Western countries, there are politicians who openly and candidly use unilateral sanctions as a weapon of economic warfare in an attempt to create economic hardship and humanitarian disasters. They seek to induce internal chaos in the countries targeted in order to achieve their schemes of hindering development, exerting political pressure, and even overthrowing the government.
Targeting Iran oil industry and financial sector have reduced national revenue, preventing access of Iran to global markets and disrupting trade. This has triggered soaring inflation and caused widespread economic hardship, disproportionately affecting vulnerable populations such as low-income families, women, and children.
My country, Syria, has been suffering for over 4 decades from the impact of the illegitimate, immoral, and inhuman unilateral coercive measures that have been enforced by consecutive U.S. administrations, followed by its allies in the EU and other countries.
We have to think of sanctions as always, and I mean always, affecting the most vulnerable. So if we think that these sanctions are done because we want what's best for people, then that's completely wrong. These sanctions are done because they want to get the power and or the resources that these governments have. And that's the real goal. So this imperial tactics, these sanctions that most are supported by the United States, the European countries, and of course the Security Council and its allies, or lackeys rather, in the UN, the real goal is to weaken countries to be able to take over them. That's the simple way of saying it. Whether we call IMF loans, whether we call them invasion, whether we call it partnerships or Commonwealth, as some new colonies are called here in the U.S., that is the real goal, and that's what must be stopped. The fake goal, what they mention of helping people, then that goal is not obtained. So if that's their goal, they should stop doing sanctions because that goal is not obtained. But we know their goal is far more sinister than that.
They have more than half of the population of the planet Earth under sanctions, illegal sanctions, I might add, which is contrary to international law. They put up these little fronts, like I was remembering an article came out the other day where as a filler to see what China's reaction would be when they were saying that the U.S. may start seizing tankers, oil tankers at sea, if they are Iranian oil tankers. And we know that Iran is not the target there. We know that China is the target there to seize those oil tankers because Iran was starting to gear more towards China and ship oil more towards the east. But here's something. Back to what Trump said. All of this plays in hand. Trump says that the U.S. would sanction nations, any BRIC nation and other nations that refuses to use the dollar in trade. So the article comes out today on Sputnik News, and it says U.S. bid to force nations to use dollar will accelerate shift to national currency. And this comes from Moscow. And it says, if the United States uses force to make countries use the dollar, this could strengthen the tend to switch to using national currencies in foreign economic activity, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said on Monday. It is not only about BRICS countries. In general, more and more countries are starting to switch to using national currencies in trade and economic and foreign economic activities. This is a process that is gaining momentum all around the world. On the other hand, if the U.S. using force, as they say, economically, some kind of influence compels countries to use the dollar, this will probably further strengthen these trends to switch to national currencies. Now, they're saying that, I was taught this, that if you're in a ditch or in a hole, stop digging because the hole will only get bigger. So how does America think that she's going to dig herself out of the hole by throwing stuff at the people with the rope to pull her out of the hole? How is that, Carl? That is not sound, rational, or sane policy or judgment.
I mean, this goes back to the short-term thinking of the Americans ruling class. They're not thinking 5-10 years ahead. Only thing they're thinking is in the immediate terms. How do they win the election for the next round? How do they get more financial backers for their political stands? I mean, or for the people Wall Street type, how does it look on the quarterly earning reports? How that's going to affect our stock price. For things that beyond 5-10 years, that's after their time in the office. They don't care about that. This is everything is geared toward short-term gain and short-term thinking, and they're also not. When they're talking about America's interests, they're not talking about America's interest of of average Americans, working Americans. They're talking about their own interests and the interest of their financial backers. So for them, they still think they can control the world by wielding the dollar as a weapon. What they don't realize, people use dollar because it's easy to use, because it's because it's commonly accepted currency. By making it harder, they're creating the incentive for the destruction of the dollar hegemony. We saw what happened with the Russian sanction. That's really the biggest kind of the snowball that got the snowball rolling. The Russian sanction. And they're tightening. Now they're tightening the financial sanction on Russia. Again, it's just thinking that, okay, if the sanction didn't work, we just apply more sanctions. This is the same logic on the chip sanction against China. If it doesn't work, we'll do more. And it's just going to accelerate. It's going to accelerate towards the future the most fear, which is the dollar increasingly losing its power as the prestige currency, as the world's reserve currency. And this is why China was offering dollar-denominated bonds in Saudi Arabia. And you're thinking, well, like, why is China offering dollar-denominated bonds? But if you look at the rate China was getting the exact same rate as the U.S. government, which means in times of credit worthy, the people who are buying into the Chinese bonds, they're also Chinese government, in other words, they can borrow money in dollars as cheaply as the United States government now. and whereas these dollars were originally supposed to be recycled into U.S. Treasury to uphold the dollar strength and to uphold to inject more cash in the U.S. economy. Now, all the Saudi Arabian princes who have a lot of dollar on their hand from the oil trade, now they can buy the Chinese dollar-denominated bonds, and that money no longer is cycling back to the U.S. So in this way, China's like, you know what? We don't even need a BRICS currency. We can keep using the dollar, but those dollars are not coming back to you. They're going to me. And then we're going to take that dollar. We're going to invest in the global south. We're going to build infrastructures. And those other global south countries, they can take those dollars and to pay back their debts for IMF or World Bank or whatever the U.S. lending institutions. So it's a win-win. Everybody gets ports, they get infrastructure. Saudi Arabia, they don't have to put all their money back into the U.S. stock market, U.S. Treasury. They can buy the Chinese-denominated bonds. And also, of course, all these Gulf countries, they're also hedging. They're seeing which way the wind is blowing. They're hedging for the future. They saw that China is up and coming. They'd rather be on China's good graces and also diversify their own dollar holdings, because they saw what happened to Russia. When United States can just by decree taking away Russia's $400 million of dollar reserve, It's like, okay, well, this could be us in the future if somehow we offended United States. So we have all these dollars, we don't know what to do. So, okay, now we have a choice. We have an alternative. We can buy the Chinese denominated bonds. Now, the reason China is off issuing dollar bonds because China also have a lot of dollars from its trade surplus. And China do not want to invest those dollars back into the U.S. Treasury, what they used to do. Now I think that at the height, China at one time China had 1.4 or 1.2 trillion dollars worth of U.S. Treasury bills, and now that's down to 700 billion level. China already greatly reduced its holding on U.S. Treasury. So instead, China is turning those dollars into investment in global South countries rather than investing in U.S. Treasury bills. Because U.S. sanctions is telling China, like, you know what, those paper IOU I give you, you can't actually use it to buy stuff. You can't actually use it to buy stuff you want to buy, like chips, like technological imports from the United States. Only thing we want you to buy is U.S. Treasury bills to finance our debt. And China's like, no deal, man. We don't want that. And now we're going to invest those dollars into ports and railroads and airports in Africa, in Southeast Asia, in North Africa. Then those actually add economic value by creating global interconnectivity, then increasing trade, and we'll rather build megaports in Peru that will increase our trade with Latin America. This is why U.S. don't know what to. They have no counter for this because China is using their dollars to defeat their dollar strategy. Like China is playing Go and U.S. is playing checkers. Go ahead.
I wanted to say something to you because I don't think you said something that brought something to my mind when you brought about the $400 billion that was stolen from Russia. Do you recall that they were trying to implement a plan prior to Russia, the Ukrainian situation against China, when they were saying that when Trump was president, and he was saying that the U.S. should just default on the Chinese debt because of COVID, and they would not, and the Western world should get together and sue China and not repay the debts because of COVID. Do you remember that? I remember that very clearly. Do you think that reeked of desperation and since they could not at the time justify it and actually recover from it if they would have implemented, do you think that they said, well, you know what, let's just change the nation and try to implement it against Russia?
They, all these U.S. have been weaponizing weaponizing the dollar and its control of financial system for a long time, and they do this. They first did this against North Korea, and this is when they come down on the banks that have any transaction with. This was a Chinese bank, by the way, that U.S. was accusing of doing transaction for North Korea, and because they accused the Chinese bank of acting as a money laundering to North Korea. So it banned the Chinese bank from U.S. SWIFT system, right? And so all these tools they developed against North Korea later they used to apply to Russia on a much bigger scale. But many people, I think as you do, this is a trial run. Mm-hmm. Like what against Russia is something for even much bigger. Is they're ready all the tools for the China sanction, and right now they're already like up their antes on like in the technology sanction against China. I mean the financial sanction is just the next step. This is why China has been quietly trying to move off this U.S. Treasury bill scheme. This is why they're trying to have. This is the whole reason China is building. Well, part of the reason China is investing so many dollars into the Belt and Road Initiative. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, we'd rather have those dollars to do something, to make tangible stuff, to rather than having them sit collecting measly interest as the U.S. Treasury bills, and we find much more productive use of these dollars we accrue from the trade surplus by investing in infrastructure, create more trade, create more economic growth, then continue to fund U.S. government expenditures through U.S. Treasury bill. U.S. hasn't figured out a way to counter that. This is why they're just throwing shit on the wall and see what sticks right now against China. and right now nothing is sticking. Nothing is sticking. The chip sanction has failed. They're coming out with more chip sanction, but China is already well prepared for that. China is they are also fully prepared for any kind of financial sanction that U.S. is ready to leverage against them. That's why they created their own alternative to the SWIFT system that had helped Russia out during the sanction time. So I don't think I don't think U.S. have any kind of strategy, real effective strategy to counter China. This is why they're getting desperate. This is why you're gonna see in the next few years the copium level. The only manufacturing that U.S. is gonna go up is the copium production. The copium production is gonna go through the roof as China continued to advance despite all the U.S. sanctions thrown against it. And so I look forward to that. I really do.
All right, closing, everybody, we got to thank Carl for coming on the platform again. This is a little series that he and I do, the War Report. I want to thank my brother and my friend Carl for coming on. We'll have him back on soon. Everybody, thank you all for joining us. As I always say, be good to others. Do right by others, not because other people are watching or because there's some financial gain. Do right because it's the right thing to do. All right? Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true, but above all things, stay righteous. Hey, mama, your baby boy loves you more than life. Deuces, everybody. Thank you. I'm out of here.